Now, before my kinfolk start texting each other, let me say this right up front. This story has been seasoned, stirred, renamed, and blessed for everybody's protection. If your toes feel stepped on, just scoot 'em back under the pew and keep listening. Because I'm not here to embarrass anybody. I'm here to tell what happens when folks mistake kindness for a contract. Now, when I retired, I had a picture in my mind, and let me tell you, it was a pretty picture. I saw myself waking up slow, not jumping out of bed like somebody had fired a starter pistol, not hunting for work clothes, not packing a lunch, not looking at a clock and wondering how I was already late before my feet even hit the floor. No, ma'am. I saw coffee on the porch. I saw quiet mornings with the Lord. I saw my Bible open, my chickens acting like they owned the place, the goats hollering like they had legal complaints, and me sitting there in the peace of God, just breathing like a woman who had finally made it to the other side of years and years of responsibility. I thought retirement meant rest. I thought it meant slower days. I thought it meant maybe I could clean out a closet without needing a 3-day recovery plan. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could sit down long enough to drink a whole cup of coffee while it was still hot. But apparently, somebody else had a different vision for my retirement. Because while I was picturing prayer, peace, and porch sitting, somebody else was picturing something closer to a child care facility. And nobody told me I had applied. No application, no interview, no business license, no snack fee, no nap mats, no little cubbies with names on them. Just me, my house, my rocking chair, and apparently a full-time toddler ministry I did not know I had been appointed to. Now listen, I love my grandchildren. Let me say that loud enough for the people in the back and the relatives with selective hearing. I love those babies. I love their little faces. I love their little laughs. I love when they run in with arms wide open like I'm the best thing they've seen since fruit snacks. A grandbaby can walk into a room and make your heart do things your knees can't afford. And these little boys? Mercy. Two stair-step little fellows. One was 4, with questions stacked up higher than a hay wagon. "MeMe, why is the sky blue? MeMe, why do chickens run funny? MeMe, why does Paw Paw make that noise when he gets out of the chair?" And then the 2-year-old, who didn't ask many questions because he was too busy conducting scientific research on how many things could fit inside a heating vent. And then, bless it all, here came the news that another baby boy was on the way. 3 boys. 3, that is not a family. That is a traveling wrestling ministry. Now, my daughter in this story was helping with charities full time. She was busy doing good things, showing up at fundraisers, smiling in pictures, supporting causes, helping people, and making the family look polished and caring in public. And her husband worked in one of those tall glass office towers in the big city. You know the kind of building where the windows shine so bright you can see your own poor decisions reflected back at you. He wore nice suits, had important meetings, shook important hands, said important words like leadership, growth, and next quarter, like he was speaking in tongues for corporate America. And I'm not saying he didn't work hard. He did. But somewhere between his meetings and her charity work, somebody looked over at me and thought, well, Mimi is retired now. And that sentence right there is where trouble put on shoes and started walking toward my front door. Because folks hear the word retired and think it means available. They think retired means you're just sitting around waiting for somebody to assign you a task. They think retired means your calendar is empty, your body is brand new, your energy has been restored like an old pickup with a fresh battery, and your only purpose now is to be helpful on demand. But let me tell you something. Retired does not mean expired. Retired does not mean unemployed by everybody with a favor, and retired does not mean I came with free drop off hours. But at first, I didn't see it that way. At first, I was just happy to help, because that's who I am. If I see a stranger in the grocery aisle looking confused at the canned tomatoes, I'll answer the question they didn't even ask. If I see something sitting on the wrong shelf, I'll pick it up and put it where it belongs. If somebody drops something, I'm bending down to get it, even if I make that old person noise on the way back up. I believe kindness matters. I believe respect still matters. I believe we are supposed to care about people, even the ones we may never see again, because I am the daughter of the God who sees all, and if he sees that stranger in aisle 5, then I ought to see them too. So when family needs help, of course my heart moves. Of course I want to say yes. Of course I want to be there. That's what love does. But there is a difference between being helpful and being handled. There is a difference between being needed and being used. And sometimes people who know your heart will try to build a whole schedule on top of it. That's where this story really begins. Not with a big fight, not with a shouting match, not with somebody kicking open a door like a daytime drama. No, it started with one little sentence. Can you watch the boys for just a minute? Now, I have lived long enough to know that just a minute is one of the most dangerous phrases in the English language. A minute in family language can mean anything from 60 seconds to the second coming. But I said yes, because I loved them, because I wanted to help, because I thought it was just this once, and because, apparently, I still had a few lessons to learn about the difference between a favor and a pattern. So I opened my door. I opened my arms. I opened my pantry. And before I knew it, my peaceful retirement morning had turned into juice cups, cartoon noises, sticky fingerprints, and one little boy asking if goats go to heaven. And you know what? That part made me smile. Because children are precious. They are noisy, sticky, expensive little blessings, but precious. What I did not know yet was that this just for a minute was not really a minute. It was a test run. And baby, I was about to find out that some folks don't ask for help because they value your time. Sometimes they ask because they already decided your time belongs to them. But God saw it. He saw the smiles. He saw the assumptions. He saw the little comments. He saw what was being planned before I ever caught on. And let me tell you something about the Lord. You may be slow to notice when somebody is taking advantage of you, but God is not. He does not miss the quiet pressure. He does not miss the guilt wrapped up in sweet words. He does not miss the way people will use your kindness and then act surprised when you finally need a boundary. And in this story, God was already watching. I just didn't know yet that He was about to hit record. Now that first day, I didn't think a thing about it. That's how these things usually start, isn't it? Nothing comes at you wearing a sign that says, "Hello, I am about to become a long-term problem." No. It comes dressed up like a small favor, a just this once. And if you've got a heart that leans toward helping, you'll open the door before your common sense can get its shoes on. That was me. My daughter called first. Her voice had that rushed sound to it, like she was holding a purse, a phone, a half-finished thought, and the entire weight of the world all at the same time. "Mama, can you watch the boys for just a little bit?" Now, a little bit sounds harmless. A little bit sounds like half an hour. A little bit sounds like you can still finish your coffee, fold a load of towels, and sit down long enough to remember your own name. So I said, "Sure, baby, bring 'em on." because that is what mothers do. And grandmothers? Honey, grandmothers do it with snacks. A few minutes later, here they came. Two little boys hopping out of the car like somebody had shaken up two soda bottles and popped the tops off. The 4-year-old came in first, talking before both feet crossed the threshold. "MeMe, did you know worms don't have legs?" I said. "Well, I had suspected as much, but thank you for the official report." Then here came the 2-year-old behind him, clutching a little toy truck in one hand and something sticky in the other. To this day, I do not know what it was. I have learned not to ask too many questions when toddlers come bearing mystery stuff. You just wipe the hand, bless the child, and move forward in faith. My daughter looked tired, and I mean that kind of tired young mothers get where even their ponytail looks like it has been praying for deliverance. She had charity meetings that day, errands, calls to make, things to organize, and another baby boy growing inside her like heaven had decided she needed a third round of tiny cowboy boots and dinosaur pajamas. So I hugged her. I told her not to worry. I told her I had it handled. And I meant it, because I did have it handled, at least for the first hour. The boys played, they ate crackers, they watched cartoons, they asked me questions, they investigated my cabinets like they had a search warrant. And I kept thinking, this is sweet. This is what retirement gives you, more time with the babies. And part of that was true. There is something holy about a grandchild crawling up next to you with sleepy eyes and cracker dust on his shirt. There is something beautiful about being the safe place where little feet can run, and I do not take that lightly. Children remember who made them feel loved. They remember who listened. They remember who had the good snacks. They remember who let them talk about bugs, tractors, superheroes, dinosaurs, and whether or not Jesus likes peanut butter. So I was grateful. I really was. But then the first hour became the second hour, and the second hour started leaning toward the third, and my coffee, which had once been hot and full of promise, was now sitting cold on the counter like a forgotten dream. I texted my daughter. "Everything okay?" She answered back, "Yes, Mama, running behind. Thank you so much." Well, that was fine. People run behind. Life happens, babies happen, traffic happens, and apparently in the big city, parking garages happen, which, from what I understand, are just concrete mazes built to test your salvation. So I kept going. I made sandwiches. I cut grapes. I picked up blocks. I rescued a sock from the toilet area before it became part of some toddler experiment. The 4-year-old wanted to know why my chickens had names but the eggs didn't. I told him, because if I name an egg, I can't scramble it with a clear conscience. He thought about that for a minute and said, "Does God know the eggs?" I said, "Baby, God knows everything, but let's not make breakfast complicated." By the time my daughter came back, the boys were still alive, still sticky, and mostly wearing the same clothes they came in. That is a successful child care report right there. She thanked me. She hugged me. She looked relieved, and I felt good. I had helped my child. I had loved on my grandbabies. I had done something useful. And that would have been perfectly fine if it had stayed right there. But favors have a way of growing legs when nobody puts a fence around them. The next time came a few days later. This time, it was a text. "Mama, I hate to ask, but can you keep the boys for a little while? We have something important come up." Now, when somebody starts with, "I hate to ask," you better hold on to your purse and your peace, because they usually do not hate it enough to stop asking. But again, I said yes, because I understood busy. I understood wanting to support your husband. Her husband, the tower man, had some kind of work dinner or promotion related something. You know how those things sound. They call it networking now. 30 years ago, we just called it standing around talking to people you hoped could help you later. But now they put it in a hotel conference room, add tiny food on toothpicks, and everybody acts like it is strategy. My daughter was going with him. She had to look nice, smile nice, stand beside him like a polished little picture of family values and community involvement. And I don't say that ugly. There is nothing wrong with supporting your spouse. There is nothing wrong with doing good work and building a life. But there is something wrong when the person who makes everybody else's life look smooth is quietly getting all the rough edges thrown into her lap. And that day, that lap was mine. They brought the boys over again. This time there were bags, not one little backpack. Bags. A diaper bag, a snack bag, a bag of just-in-case clothes, a bag with toys, a bag with cups, a bag with things I did not recognize and was afraid to touch. When a toddler comes with more luggage than a traveling evangelist, that is usually a sign the visit may be longer than advertised. But I still smiled. I still kissed those babies. I still said, "Y'all come on in." My son-in-law stood at the doorway checking his phone. He had that busy look, like every second of his life had a dollar sign attached to it. He said, "We really appreciate this," but he said it while looking at the screen. Now listen, I do not need folks to fall down and build me a monument every time I help. I do not need applause. But if you are handing me 2 children under 5, a snack bag, a diaper bag, and one of them has already taken off one shoe before crossing the threshold, you can look me in the eye for 3 seconds. That is not pride. That is basic transfer of custody courtesy. My daughter kissed the boys. He gave one of those quick little waves, and off they went. The door closed. I looked at the bags. I looked at the boys. The boys looked at me. The 2-year-old smiled like he had plans, and I said, "Lord, I'm gonna need you and possibly a mop." That evening stretched, and stretched, and stretched some more. The boys ate, they played, they argued over a toy neither one had wanted until the other one touched it. The 4-year-old asked me if angels wear shoes. The 2-year-old tried to feed a cracker to my couch cushion. I changed a diaper. I cleaned up juice. I found a toy truck inside my mixing bowl. And somewhere around bedtime, I realized something important. Nobody had mentioned bedtime. That is when my spirit got suspicious, because there is a big difference between a little while and please keep them until they are unconscious. I texted. No answer. I waited. I prayed a small prayer that was mostly breathing. Then I texted again. Finally, my daughter replied, "Almost done. Thank you, Mama. You're the best." Now, I love being called the best. I do, but sometimes "you're the best" is not a compliment. Sometimes it is a sugar packet sprinkled over disrespect. It sounds sweet, but it does not change what is underneath. Still, I gave grace, because grace is what I had been given, and I do believe in helping family. I believe in showing up when people need you. The Bible says in Galatians 6:2, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." I believe that. But I also know there is another verse just a few lines later that says, "For each one shall bear his own load." That's verse 5. And that is where some folks get selective with the word. They remember the part where you help them. They forget the part where they still carry what belongs to them. That night, when they finally came back, the boys were asleep. One had his mouth open, one had a sock missing. I handed over bags, blankets, cups, and one small shoe I found under the chair. My daughter looked thankful. My son-in-law looked tired, and I told myself, it's fine, this was important. They needed help. But something in me knew, not angry, not bitter, just aware. You know how the Holy Spirit will give you that little nudge, not loud, not dramatic, just a knowing down in your spirit that says, pay attention, daughter. And I did, 'cause the first time was a favor, the second time was still understandable, but by the third time I was about to learn that some people were not asking whether I could help. They were checking how far they could go before I stopped saying yes. And like I said before, God already saw it. He saw the pattern forming. He saw the assumption growing. He saw my love being measured for a harness. And I was about to find out that just for a minute had become the family's new child care policy. Only nobody had bothered to ask MeMe. By the third time, I started noticing things. Not big things at first. Not the kind of things you can point at and say, there it is. That's the problem. No, it was little things. A text that came later than it should have. A drop-off that happened quicker than it used to. A thank you that got shorter. A bag that got bigger. A pickup time that somehow disappeared from the conversation completely. And if you have ever been the dependable woman in the family, you already know what I mean. People do not always announce when they are about to take advantage of you. They ease into it. They test the water with one toe, then one foot. Then before you know it, they are standing in the middle of your piece with both shoes on, asking where you keep the extra juice boxes. Now, I was still trying to be understanding. My daughter was pregnant with that third baby boy, and she was tired. Her ankles were swelling. Her emotions were up and down. She was trying to keep up with charity meetings, church events, family appearances, and whatever else my son-in-law had attached to his promotion ladder. And I loved her. I still do. A mother can see her grown child carrying too much and feel it in her own bones. So when she needed help, my heart still moved toward yes. But my son-in-law? Now that is where my eyebrows started having conversations with each other, because he had begun saying little things, not direct things, not honest things, just little comments tossed out like breadcrumbs. One afternoon, he walked in wearing one of those crisp dress shirts that looked like it had never met a wrinkle in its life. He was holding his phone, talking about some upcoming conference, some leadership opportunity, some big, important project that apparently could not survive without him. The boys were running circles around my coffee table, one pretending to be a dinosaur, and the other one sounding like a tractor with bronchitis. My daughter was gathering their things, one hand on her belly, moving slower than usual. And my son-in-law looked around my living room and smiled. Not a thankful smile, more like a planning smile. Then he said, real casual, "You sure are good with them, MeMe." Now, that sounds sweet. It could have been sweet. But there was something in the way he said it. Like he was not giving a compliment. He was inspecting a service. I said, "Well, I've raised a few children in my time. I know how to keep a young'un alive till supper." He laughed. Then he said, "That's good, because once this new baby gets here, we're really going to need all hands on deck. All hands on deck. I heard it. My spirit heard it. I believe even the couch heard it." I looked at him and said, Now, every Southern woman knows that is not agreement. Can mean many things. It can mean, I heard you. It can mean, the Lord is helping me not answer that. It can mean, you better keep walking before I translate my face into words. And in that moment, my was carrying a lot of luggage. He didn't notice. Or if he did, he pretended not to. He just kept talking. He said, "With 3 boys, we're going to have to get a system." A system. Now, I am not opposed to systems. I have systems. I have a system for feeding animals. I have a system for grocery shopping. I have a system for knowing which plastic container lid belongs to nothing but still keeping it because hope springs eternal. But what I did not have was a system where my retirement became their backup plan, primary plan, emergency plan, and we forgot to ask, but assumed anyway plan. I smiled, but it was one of those smiles where only the mouth participates. I said, well, babies are a blessing. And they are. Every child is a blessing. But a blessing still needs diapers, bottles, naps, patience, and an adult who agreed to the schedule. A blessing is not supposed to be dropped off like an Amazon return. Over the next couple of weeks, the hints kept coming. One day, he mentioned how expensive childcare had gotten in the city. He said it while looking right at me. "Childcare is outrageous now," he said. "I don't know how people do it." I said, "They plan, budget, and pray." He chuckled like I had made a joke. I hadn't. Another time, he said, "It's just hard to trust strangers with babies these days." I said, "It surely is. That's why parents have to be careful what they commit to before the baby comes." He nodded, but I could tell that answer didn't land where he wanted it to, because what he wanted was for me to jump in and say, "Oh, honey, don't worry, just bring that newborn to MeMe. I'll take the baby, the toddlers, the diaper bags, the bottles, the laundry, and whatever else rolls out of your SUV." But I did not say that. The old me might have. The tired me almost did. The people-pleasing part of me knew the words by memory. "I'll help. We'll figure it out. Bring them if you need to." But the Holy Spirit kept putting a gentle check in me. Not harsh, not angry, just firm, like a hand on my shoulder saying, "Daughter, do not volunteer for a burden I did not assign you." And I needed that. Because when you have spent your life helping people, it can feel wrong to pause. It can feel selfish to notice your own limits. It can feel unchristian to say, "That is too much." But Jesus never asked us to become doormats and call it love. He washed feet. He did not let people walk all over him. There is a difference. Then came the day that opened my eyes wide enough to see the whole thing. They had dropped the boys off again. No real pickup time, no real plan. Just that same breezy, "We won't be long." By then, I had learned that "we won't be long" had cousins. Just a minute. Little while. Running behind. Almost done. And my personal favorite, "You're the best." That day, the 4-year-old had decided my throw pillows were stepping stones across hot lava. The 2-year-old had removed every spoon from the drawer and lined them up like he was starting a tiny restaurant. I was making peanut butter crackers, wiping noses, and silently asking the Lord why children only get thirsty after you sit down. My son-in-law came to pick them up late. Again. My daughter was not with him this time. He stepped inside, still on his phone, still half somewhere else. He looked at the boys, looked at the scattered toys, and said, "Looks like they had a good day." I said, "They had a full day." There is a difference. He smiled, still not catching it. Then he said, "You know, once the baby's here, it might actually be easier if they're all in one place sometimes." I stopped folding the little shirt in my hand. All in one place. Sometimes. There it was again. The hint wearing a hat. I said, "What do you mean by all?" He shrugged. "Oh, you know, the boys, the baby, just so she can rest, or go to appointments, or when we've got events. We'll need help juggling all 3. We. That word nearly took me out, because some people say we when they mean you. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I saw it clear. This man was not asking if I could help with a newborn. He was already imagining it. He had built a little childcare castle in his mind, and somehow I was living in the basement holding a bottle. Now I could feel that old, familiar pressure rise up. The part of me that wanted nobody disappointed. The part of me that did not want my daughter stressed. The part of me that loved those little boys so much it hurt. But then I pictured it. A 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, a newborn, all at once, in my retired house, on my retired body, with my retired nerves, and somewhere deep down, my spirit said, no. Not loud, not rude, not hateful, just no. And honey, sometimes heaven will whisper a no before your mouth gets brave enough to say it. I took a breath. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. I said, I love these babies. You know I do. He smiled, probably thinking I was about to make his life easier. I said, but I am not going to be able to keep 3 little ones like that, especially not a newborn on top of 2 toddlers. His smile changed. Just a little. You would have missed it if you had not spent your whole life reading faces at family gatherings. He said, well, I mean not all the time. I said, I understand, but no. He blinked, like the word had come out in a foreign language. I said it again, calmer. No, that will be too much for me. The house got quiet. Well, as quiet as it can get with one child making truck noises and another one asking if babies come with teeth. He said, we were just thinking since you're retired. And there it was, the sentence, the one I knew was coming. Since you're retired. I folded the dish towel once, then twice, because sometimes your hands need something holy to do while your mouth stays saved. I said, retired means I left my job. It does not mean I opened a nursery. He gave a little laugh, but it was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh people use when they are trying to make your boundaries sound silly. I kept my voice steady. I can visit, I can love on them, I can help sometimes when we plan it ahead, but I cannot be the child care plan for 3 small boys. Then I said the sentence that felt like it had been waiting years to come out of me. No is a complete sentence. Now, did I say it loud? No. Did I say it ugly? No. Did I say it with a little country steel in my backbone? Yes. I believe I did. He stood there for a second, looking like a man whose spreadsheet had just met the Holy Ghost. And I knew right then something had shifted, because once a dependable woman says no, the people who depended on her silence do not always receive it with grace. Sometimes they pout. Sometimes they pressure. Sometimes they go tell the story in a way that makes them the victim and you the villain. And, sure enough, that is when the guilt trip started packing its bags. But for that moment, I had peace. Not because he understood, not because he agreed. I had peace because I had finally obeyed the nudge God had been giving me all along. Love can help. Love can serve. Love can rock babies, make sandwiches, wipe tears, and pray blessings over every child in the room. But love is not supposed to be used as a leash, and my leash had just been unclipped. I did not know yet what he would say after that. I did not know how the story would get twisted. I did not know that my simple little no was about to become a whole family headline. But God knew. And just like before, he saw everything. He saw the hints. He saw the assumptions. He saw the moment I finally stood up without raising my voice. And he saw what happened next. Because when people cannot control your yes anymore, they often try to punish your no. Now, I wish I could tell you that when I said no, Everybody respected it. I wish I could tell you my daughter's husband nodded his head, thanked me for all I had already done, picked up those little boys, and went home to discuss childcare like a grown man with a calendar. But that is not how this went. No, ma'am, because when some folks are used to your yes, your no sounds like rebellion. And my no must have sounded like I had declared independence, built a fence, and hung up a sign that said, "MeMe's Daycare is closed until further notice." He did not argue much right there in my living room. That would have been too obvious. He was too polished for that. This man was the kind of fellow who could smile while answering an email on his phone. He just gave one of those tight little laughs and said, "Well, we'll figure something out." But the way he said it told me exactly what he meant. He did not mean, "We will respectfully make other arrangements." He meant, "We will now begin a campaign to make you feel bad." And honey, that campaign had a full committee. It started small. That evening, my daughter called. Now, I knew before I even answered that phone that somebody had stirred the soup. A mama can tell. There is a tone in the ring sometimes. I picked up and said, "Hey, baby." She said, "Mama, did something happen with him today?" There it was. Not, "Thank you for watching the boys." Not, "Are you tired?" Not, "How are you feeling?" Just, "Did something happen?" I said, "I told him I could not keep all 3 boys when the baby comes." There was a pause. Not a mad pause. More like a tired pause. The kind of pause that sits down in a chair before it speaks. She said, "I know it's a lot, Mama. We just thought maybe sometimes—" Now listen. Sometimes is another one of those slippery words. Sometimes can mean once a month. Sometimes can mean every Wednesday. Sometimes can mean every time my son-in-law has a meeting, your daughter has a fundraiser, the baby sneezes, the weather changes, or somebody in the house feels overwhelmed. Sometimes is a word people use when they do not want to say schedule. I said, "Baby, I love you. I love those boys. But 3 little ones at once is too much for me." She got quiet again, and I could hear the weariness in her. That part hurt, because I did not want my daughter to suffer. I did not want her carrying more than she should. I did not want her stuck between a husband with ambition and a mama with limits. But I also knew something else. If I kept saying yes just to rescue everybody from discomfort, I would eventually be the one needing rescue. And I have lived long enough to know this truth. You cannot pour from an empty pitcher and call it ministry. You can try. You can tilt it. You can shake it. You can act like something is coming out. But empty is empty. And I was not going to wait until I was worn thin, resentful, and whispering prayers through clenched teeth before I admitted the truth. So I stayed calm. I said, "I can help sometimes if we plan ahead. I can visit. I can take one child for a little while. I can come sit with you after the baby is born. But I cannot become the child care plan." She said, "I understand." But she said it like somebody who understood with her mind and hurt with her heart. And I hated that. Still, peace does not always feel good at first. Sometimes peace feels like disappointing somebody you love, so you do not abandon yourself. Now, I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I thought we had talked. I thought I had been clear. I thought the word no had entered the room, sat down, and been acknowledged. But the next few days taught me that no does not bother everybody the same way. Some people hear no and adjust. Other people hear no and start recruiting witnesses. And sure enough, little comments began floating through the family like gnats at a picnic. Not direct, of course. Never direct. Just little statements. "Well, Some people don't understand how hard young families have it now. Grandparents used to help more. It must be nice to be retired and have all that free time. All that free time. Honey, those words almost needed a laying on of hands. Because if retirement gives you one thing, it is not automatically free time. It gives you a body that knows every job you ever worked. It gives you knees that send weather reports. It gives you mornings where you have to stretch before you can trust your ankles. It gives you a calendar full of doctor appointments, household work, animals to feed, bills to manage, and the quiet healing you postponed for 30 years because everybody else needed something. But folks do not always see that. They just see that you are home, and home to them means available. One afternoon, somebody made the comment, "Well, it takes a village." Now, I believe in the village. I do. But let me tell you what I have noticed. A lot of people who say it takes a village are usually looking for one unpaid villager with snacks. The village is supposed to help. The village is not supposed to be one tired MeMe with a dish towel, a Bible, and a 4-year-old asking if frogs have feelings. Then came the church shoe guilt. That is what I call it when manipulation gets dressed up in holy language. Somebody said, family is supposed to sacrifice. And I said, yes, but sacrifice is something you offer. It is not something people are supposed to yank out of your hands. Somebody else said, children are a blessing. I said, they sure are, but even blessings need boundaries and a booster seat. Then came the one that almost made me bite my tongue clean in half. Well, I thought Christians were supposed to help? Now, let me pause right there, because nothing will test your sanctification like somebody using your Jesus to get their way. I have loved the Lord all my life. I believe in helping. I believe in serving. I believe in feeding people, praying for people, holding doors, picking up what somebody dropped, and treating strangers like God might have sent them across my path on purpose. But I do not believe the Bible says, "Thou shalt become everybody's backup plan while they build their dream life on top of your spine." That is not a scripture. That is manipulation with a church hat on. Jesus said to love your neighbor. He did not say, let your neighbor move in, eat your groceries, rearrange your schedule, hand you 3 children, and then call you selfish when you need a nap. And yes, I said that in my spirit first, because the Holy Ghost and I were working on my mouth. Out loud, I said, helping is holy, being used is not. That sentence got quiet real fast. You know you have hit the truth when the room suddenly starts studying the carpet. But the comments did not stop. They just went underground. My daughter got quieter. Her husband got busier. Pickup times got even more vague. And every time I asked for a clear plan, I felt that little pushback. Not outright anger, just pressure, like somebody leaning on a gate to see if the latch would hold. And my latch was holding. Barely some days, but holding, because I had prayed. I had said, Lord, help me stay loving. Help me stay kind. Help me not sin with my mouth. Help me not carry what you did not give me. And Lord, if I am wrong, correct me. But if I am right, strengthen me. That is a dangerous prayer, because God will do both. He will correct you if your heart is ugly, and He will strengthen you if your boundary is holy. One day, my son-in-law showed up with the boys again, and before I could even say anything, he said, I know, you're not the daycare. He laughed, but it had a little sting on it. I smiled and said, good, as long as everybody knows. He blinked. I think he expected me to backpedal. I did not. Then he said, we just don't have the support system some people have. Now there it was again. The sentence meant to pull guilt out of my pocket. I said, "Support is good. Assumption is different." He looked at me like I had handed him a math problem. So I explained, "If you ask me and I can help, I will. If you assume I'm available, that's where we have trouble." He gave another little laugh. "Well, we're all just doing our best." I said, "Then your best needs a calendar." Now, I probably should have left that last part in my head. But sometimes a sentence slips past the security guard, and honestly, it was not wrong. He did not like it, though. I could tell. His face stayed polite, but his eyes got cool. That is when I knew this was not just about childcare. This was about control. He wanted me agreeable. He wanted me available. He wanted me grateful to be needed. And he wanted my daughter to keep shining beside him in public without anybody noticing that the shine was costing somebody else something in private. But God noticed. God saw the tower office. God saw the charity smiles. God saw the pictures where everybody looked generous. God saw the house where I was wiping sticky fingers and trying not to resent the people I loved. He saw the difference between public image and private pressure. And he saw me trying to stay quiet for peace. But sometimes what we call peace is just silence with a sore throat. And the Lord was not calling me to that. He was teaching me that love can be warm without being weak, that kindness can smile without surrendering, that a Christian woman can serve the Lord and still say no without apologizing for needing breath in her own lungs. Then came the family dinner. And baby, if you have ever had a family issue brewing, you know family dinner is where it either gets healed or gets seasoned and served with rolls. We were all gathered around. The boys were climbing over chairs. My daughter was tired, one hand on that baby belly. My son-in-law was telling some story about work, about how leadership means making sacrifices and showing people you are committed. I was eating my food, minding my business, which is hard to do when your spirit already knows something is coming. Then he looked across the table and said, real smooth, "We've just been trying to figure out what we're going to do when the baby comes, since some options are off the table." There it was, in front of everybody. Not my name, not directly, but everybody knew what table he meant, and everybody knew who had removed herself from it. For a second, I felt that old heat rise in my chest, that mix of embarrassment and anger and hurt, because I had not been unkind. I had not abandoned them. I had not refused love. I had simply said I could not carry 3 little boys as a regular responsibility. But he had found a way to make my boundaries sound like betrayal. My fork paused halfway to my mouth, and I heard the Lord in my spirit, quiet, steady. "Daughter, answer clean." So I put my fork down. I looked at him, then I looked at my daughter, and I said, "If the option you are talking about is MeMe becoming the child care plan for a newborn, a 2-year-old, and a 4-year-old, then yes, that option is off the table." The room went still. Even the 4-year-old stopped chewing. I kept my voice gentle. I love these children. I will always love these children. I will help when I can, with notice and within reason. But I will not be guilted into something God did not assign to me. Nobody said anything for a second. Then, because the Lord has a sense of humor, the 2-year-old dropped a roll on the floor and yelled, "Uh-oh!" And I thought, yes, baby, that about sums it up. My son-in-law's jaw tightened. My daughter looked like she wanted to disappear into her mashed potatoes, and I felt sad for her. I really did, because sometimes women get caught between the man they married and the mama who finally got brave enough to stop being used. That is not easy. So I softened my voice. I said, "Baby, I will come help you after the baby is born. I will cook. I will fold laundry. I will sit with you. I will hold the baby while you shower. I am not leaving you alone, but I am also not taking on all 3 children so everybody else can keep their public life looking easy. That last sentence landed harder than I expected. Maybe because it was true. Maybe because everybody at that table knew it. Or maybe because God was tired of watching private pressure hide behind public polish. He did not say much after that, but I could feel it, a shift, not peace yet, not understanding, more like a storm pulling itself together on the horizon. And I knew the guilt trip was not finished. It had arrived wearing church shoes, but now it was about to put on work boots. Because when quiet pressure does not move you, some people try public pressure. And when public pressure does not move you, some people start rewriting the story. They make you selfish. They make themselves wounded. They leave out the parts where you helped, loved, cooked, cleaned, prayed, and gave until your own peace was hanging on by a thread. But let me tell you something. God keeps better records than people do. He remembers every cup of water. He remembers every quiet sacrifice. He remembers every yes you gave from love. And he also remembers the moment you finally said no because he told you to protect what he gave you. I left that dinner with my heart heavy but my spirit steady. I did not know what my son-in-law was planning. I did not know what story he was going to tell. I did not know that my name was about to be dragged through a conversation I was not invited to. But God knew. And while they were getting ready to twist the truth, God was getting ready to expose it. Now, after that family dinner, I went home with a lot in my heart. And when I say a lot, I mean I had enough feelings in me to fill a church bulletin and still need extra paper. I was hurt, I was frustrated, I was tired, and I was a little bit mad. Not throw a skillet mad. Not say everything I know mad. But that quiet kind of mad where you start washing dishes that are already clean just because your hands need somewhere to put the pressure. I stood at my kitchen sink that night, looking out the window, thinking about all of it. His little comments, my daughter's tired face, those 2 sweet little boys, that baby on the way, the family dinner, the way my boundary had been served up like I had done something wrong. And I kept hearing that phrase in my mind. Since you're retired. Now let me tell you something. Those 3 words can get under a woman's skin when she has worked all her life. Because retirement does not erase the years you gave. It does not erase the early mornings. It does not erase the sore feet. It does not erase the stress, the schedules, the bills, the raising, the helping, the praying, the showing up when nobody saw how tired you were. Retirement is not an invitation for everybody to start passing you around like a spare set of keys. But some folks don't understand that. They see you home and think you are free. They see you kind and think you are easy. They see you faithful and think you will never say no. And honey, I had said no. But saying no was not the hardest part. The hardest part was not chasing everybody down afterward to explain it 12 different ways, because that is what guilt will try to make you do. Guilt says, explain it better. Guilt says, soften it more. Guilt says, maybe if you say it sweeter, they'll understand. Guilt says, maybe if you apologize for having limits, they'll stop being upset. But peace said something different. Peace said, you already answered. And sometimes that is harder than talking, because I can talk. Ask anybody who ever got stuck beside me in a grocery aisle. I can talk to a stranger about canned beans, weather, grandchildren, Jesus, and whether or not that self-checkout machine has a spirit of rebellion on it. Talking is not my problem. Staying quiet when I have already said enough, now that takes the Holy Ghost. So that night, I prayed. Not a fancy prayer, not one of those pretty prayers with stained glass words. It was more like, Lord, you see this, you see me, you see them. Please help me not act like I was raised in a barn, even though I do own animals. I told the Lord the truth. I said, God, I love my daughter. I love those babies. I do not want to hurt anybody, but I cannot do what they are trying to put on me. And Lord, if I am being selfish, show me. That part was important, because when you are setting a boundary, you need to let God search your heart, not the relatives, not the group chat, not the person who benefits from your exhaustion. God. Because people will call you selfish anytime your obedience inconveniences them, but God knows the difference between selfishness and stewardship. So I stood there at that sink and let him search me. And you know what came up? Not hate, not revenge, not I don't care. What came up was weariness. What came up was pressure. What came up was that old habit of thinking love meant carrying more than I could actually hold. And then, real soft in my spirit, I felt the Lord remind me, Daughter, I did not ask you to prove your love by losing your peace. I just stood there, water running, dish rag in my hand, heart trying to settle down, because that was it. That was the truth. I had spent years helping people. I had helped family. I had helped strangers. I had answered questions nobody asked me in the store. I had picked up things off shelves and put them where they belonged, like I was on God's unofficial grocery team. I had smiled at people who looked lonely. I had prayed for folks who never knew my name. And I did those things because I wanted to, because love moved me, because Jesus in me cares about people. But this was different. This was not love moving me. This was pressure pushing me. And those are not the same thing. Love has grace in it. Pressure has a hook. Love asks. Pressure assumes. Love receives no. Pressure punishes it. And by then, I could feel the punishment coming. Not with fists, not with yelling, but with tone, with silence, with little comments, with that family fog that rolls in when somebody wants everybody confused except the person telling the story. And sure enough, over the next few days, things got strange. My daughter still called, but not as much. When she did, her voice sounded careful. Her husband did not come in the house as far when he picked up the boys. He stayed near the doorway like my living room had offended him. Family members started asking questions that were not really questions. You doing okay? Now that sounds kind. But depending on the tone, you doing okay can mean, we heard something and we are trying to see if you will confess. I said, I'm doing fine. Another one said, I know young families are really struggling these days. I said, yes, they are. That's why they need plans. That ended that little fishing trip. Then someone else said, well, I hope nobody feels unsupported. I smiled and said, I hope nobody confuses support with surrender. Now listen, I was trying. But every now and then, a sentence will sneak out with boots on. Still, I did not want to fight. I did not want to gather my own committee. I did not want to call everybody and give my side. Because when you start chasing a lie, sometimes it drags you farther than you meant to go. So I kept praying. I said, Lord, defend me if I need defending. That is a hard prayer for a talker. Because when you know you could explain it, and you know you could straighten it out, and you know you could tell 3 details that would make everybody hush, trusting God to handle it feels like sitting on your hands during a mosquito attack. But I kept hearing that old truth. The Lord sees. The Lord knows. The Lord brings hidden things to light. And I did not know yet how literal that was about to become. A few days later, my daughter asked if I could keep the boys for one afternoon while she went to a charity planning meeting. This time she asked properly. She gave me a time. She told me what she needed. She did not assume. And because it was planned, and because it was just the two older boys for a few hours, I said yes. See, that is the part people sometimes leave out. A boundary is not the same as rejection. I had not said, I will never help. I had not said, keep those children away from me. I had not said, figure out life by yourself. I had said, I cannot become the child care plan for 3 little ones. That is reasonable. That is clear. That is not hateful. So the boys came over, and we had a good day. The 4-year-old helped me feed the chickens, which mostly meant he threw feed everywhere except where it needed to go. The 2-year-old followed behind us holding a plastic cup like he was supervising. We came back inside. We had sandwiches. We watched a little cartoon. The 2-year-old fell asleep with one sock off and one cracker still in his hand. The 4-year-old curled up on the couch with a blanket and asked me, "MeMe, does God hear kids when they pray?" I said, "Baby, he sure does." He said, "Even when they whisper?" I said, "Especially then." Then he asked, "Does God hear grown-ups when they say mean stuff?" Now, that got my attention. I looked at him real careful. You never know with children whether they are asking a deep spiritual question or repeating something they heard while half hiding behind a door. I said, "Yes, sweetheart. God hears everything, but why do you ask?" He shrugged. Just shrugged like little boys do when they have dropped a whole brick of truth and want to go back to talking about bugs. He said, "Daddy said you don't want to help us when the baby comes." There it was, a tiny voice carrying a grown-up twist. Now, I had a choice in that moment. Because children are not messengers. They are not weapons. They are not little mailmen for adult foolishness. And I was not going to put that baby in the middle of grown folks' business. So I took a slow breath. I said, "MeMe loves you very much. I love your brother. I love the new baby already. And I will always be your MeMe." He said, "But you said no?" I said, "Sometimes grown-ups have to say no when something is too much. That does not mean they stopped loving." He thought about it. Then he said, "Can I say no when brother takes my truck?" I said, "Yes, but don't hit him with it afterward." That seemed to satisfy him. He went back to his cartoon. But I sat there with my heart burning a little, because now I knew. The story had been twisted enough that even a 4-year-old had heard it. And that hurt me deeper than the family comments did. You can say what you want around grown people, but do not put confusion in a child's heart about whether they are loved. That is not right. That is not fair. And it is not of God. I went to the kitchen and leaned both hands on the counter. I said under my breath, "Lord, I need you to help me." Because I felt it then. I felt the old me, the mama bear, the country woman, the Pentecostal woman who knows how to pray and also knows how to form a sentence that can peel paint. I had a whole speech rising up in me. A beautiful speech, organized, scriptural, pointed, with examples. I could have opened with Galatians, moved into Proverbs, added a little Matthew, and closed with "Bless your heart" in a tone that needed repentance. But the Holy Ghost checked me. Not with shame, with wisdom. Not like that. So I did not call him right then. I did not send a long text. I did not type out a paragraph and then add 3 more paragraphs because I remembered something else. I prayed. I walked through my kitchen and prayed low. Lord, you heard what was said. You saw how it was said. You know the truth. Protect those children. Help my daughter. And keep my mouth clean until you tell me to speak. Now, let me be honest. keeping your mouth clean does not always mean keeping your mouth closed forever. Sometimes God does tell you to speak, but when He does, He will help you speak from strength, not from injury. And I was injured right then, so silence was wisdom. Later that evening, my daughter came to pick up the boys. She looked tired, the kind of tired that is more than pregnancy, the kind of tired that comes from living between appearances and reality. I wanted to ask her what was being said at home. I wanted to ask her why my name was coming out of a child's mouth attached to a lie. But I looked at her belly, I looked at her face, and I thought, not here, not with the boys standing here, not while she looks like one more hard sentence might break her. So I hugged her. I handed her the diaper bag. I kissed those boys. And I said, I love y'all. The 4-year-old hugged me tight. He said, MeMe, I can say no if he takes my truck. My daughter looked confused. I said, we had a life lesson. She gave a tired little laugh. Then they left, and I watched the car pull away. That is when I cried. Not big, dramatic crying, just tears, quiet ones. The kind that come when you realize you can love people with your whole heart and still be misunderstood by them. I sat down in my chair, opened my Bible, and the verse that came to my mind was not loud or fancy. It was simple. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Now I know that verse was spoken to Israel by the Red Sea, but that night, in my little living room, it felt like the Lord had handed it to one tired MeMe with a sore heart and a boundary everybody wanted to debate. Hold your peace, not lose your peace. Hold it, keep it, guard it, let God fight. So I whispered, okay, Lord, I will hold my peace, but you are going to have to hold my mouth. And He did, for the moment. But behind the scenes, something was already happening, something I did not know about. The boy's daddy had been doing some talking, not just at home, not just in little comments. He had made the mistake of saying too much in the wrong place, with the wrong device nearby. And God, who sees what is whispered in corners, was about to let the truth come walking out in plain daylight. Because sometimes the Lord does not need thunder. Sometimes He just needs a child's tablet, a little red recording light, and a man too proud to check what was on. Now let me tell you something about children and tablets. A child can forget where he put both shoes, one sock, and the cup he just had in his hand. But give that same child a tablet, and suddenly he knows how to record, swipe, zoom, delete, rename, open 3 apps, and somehow order a tractor toy from a website nobody has ever heard of. I do not understand it. I have watched grown adults struggle to turn off closed captions, but a 4-year-old can accidentally create a documentary before lunch. And that is exactly the kind of thing God used in this story. Not thunder, not lightning, not a prophet walking in with a scroll. Just a little tablet with sticky fingerprints on the screen and enough memory to humble a grown man in a dress shirt. It happened on a Saturday. My daughter had called earlier that week and asked if I could keep the boys for a few hours while she helped at a charity event. She asked nicely. She gave me a time. She told me when they would be picked up. And because it was planned, I said yes. See, I want to make that clear. I had not stopped helping. I had not stopped loving. I had not slammed the door and said, never again. I had simply stopped being assumed into service. There is a difference, a big one. So that Saturday morning the boys came over. The 4-year-old had his little tablet tucked under his arm like he was heading into an important business meeting. The 2-year-old came in holding a stuffed animal by one leg, which is how toddlers show affection and mild hostage behavior at the same time. Their daddy dropped them off that day. My daughter was already at the charity event, setting up tables, organizing volunteers, smiling in photos, and doing the kind of work that makes everybody else say, "What a beautiful family." He pulled into the driveway in that clean city vehicle that always looked like it had never hauled feed, mud, or a single loose chicken. The boys piled out. Bags came with them, of course. Snacks, clothes, wipes, little cups, a toy car, a stuffed animal, and the tablet. My son-in-law was on the phone when he got out. He nodded at me more than greeted me. He had that corporate hurry about him. You know, the kind where a man acts like if he stands still too long, the stock market might notice. I stood on the porch and waited. He ended his call and gave me one of those polite smiles. "Thanks for helping today," I said. "You're welcome." Then I added, "What time are you picking them up?" Now, that may sound simple to some folks, but let me tell you, when you have been dealing with vague drop-offs and disappearing pickup times, asking that question feels like putting a fence post in the ground. He paused. Just a little. Then he said, "Shouldn't be too long." I smiled. "No, I need a time." His eyebrows lifted. "Not much. Just enough." He said, "Probably around 2." I said, "Good. 2:00. I said it back to him like I was closing a business deal, because I was. And I believe somewhere in heaven an angel wrote it down and underlined it. 2:00. He gave a little laugh. "You're getting strict on us, MeMe," I said. "No, baby. I'm just getting clear." That smile of his got tight again. But he did not argue. He kissed the boys on top of their heads, told them to be good, and started walking back to his vehicle. The 4-year-old, already inside my house, had set his tablet down on the little table near the window. I did not know it then, but somehow, in all that little boy tapping and swiping, he had started recording. Maybe he meant to record himself. Maybe he was making one of those videos where children whisper into the camera like they are reporting breaking news from behind the couch. Maybe he hit the button by accident. I do not know. All I know is that tablet was recording, and the window was open, and his dad was standing just outside, still close enough for that little tablet to hear every word. Now, he thought I had gone to the kitchen. I had not. I was gathering a cup from the living room, but I did not hear everything at the time. That is important. This truth did not come out because I was eavesdropping. It came out because God has better timing than any of us. He got another phone call before he pulled away. And because folks love speakerphone now for reasons I may never understand, I could hear muffled bits and pieces through the screen door, not enough to know the whole conversation, just enough to know he was irritated. I heard him say, "Yeah, she's still being difficult." I stopped. Now, I told myself not to react, because difficult is one of those words people use when a woman has stopped being convenient. I stood still for a second. Then I made myself keep moving. I said under my breath, "Lord, hold my peace." A little later, I heard the vehicle door shut. He pulled away. And that was that. Or so I thought. The morning went on. The boys were in fine form. The 4-year-old wanted to help me make peanut butter crackers, which meant he spread peanut butter on one cracker, the counter, his shirt, and possibly his elbow. The 2-year-old found a plastic bowl and wore it on his head for 20 minutes like a soldier going into battle. We fed the chickens. We looked at clouds. We had a serious discussion about whether goats know their names or just recognize the sound of food. By lunchtime, I had already reheated my coffee twice and surrendered it to the Lord. Around 1:00, the 4-year-old asked if he could watch something on his tablet. I said, "For a little while." He climbed up on the couch, opened it, tapped around, then frowned. "MeMe, my video is long." I said, "What video?" He held it up to me. There he was on the screen at first. His little face, way too close to the camera. His nose looked like it was the star of the show. He whispered, "I'm at MeMe's house." Then the tablet got set down, facing sideways. The screen showed half the ceiling, half the window, and the top of a lamp. I almost laughed, but then I heard a voice. His dad's voice, clearer than I expected. I froze. On the recording, he was outside near the porch, talking on the phone, and I heard him say, "She thinks saying no is cute now." My stomach dropped. The 4-year-old looked up at me. I did not say anything. The recording kept going. The other voice on the phone was hard to hear, but his voice was plain. He said, "We'll give it a little time. Once the baby gets here, she'll come around." Then he laughed. Not a happy laugh, a smug one. He said, "She always does. She likes being needed." Now I cannot fully explain what that felt like. It was not shock, exactly, because deep down, I think I already knew. It was more like confirmation, a painful confirmation, the kind that makes your heart hurt and your spirit stand up at the same time. He kept talking. He said, "It's not like she has anything else to do now." I closed my eyes. There it was, the whole thing, the assumption, the disrespect, the little polished lie behind the polite smile. He went on, "She'll feel bad once everybody starts asking why she won't help. Her daughter needs her. She won't want to look selfish." Now, I am telling you the truth. For 1 second, my flesh rose up so fast it nearly beat my salvation to the door. I could feel the words coming. Not little words either. Big ones, organized ones, scriptural ones. Words with references and receipts. But then I looked at that 4-year-old. He was staring at me with those big eyes, not understanding everything, but understanding enough to know something was wrong. And I remembered what I had prayed. "Lord, protect the children." So I took the tablet gently. I paused the video. I smiled as soft as I could and said, "Baby, let MeMe check something, okay?" He said, "Did Daddy say bad?" That nearly broke me. I sat down beside him and said, "Grown-ups sometimes say things they shouldn't. But you are loved. Your brother is loved. That baby is loved. And none of this is your job to worry about." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "Can I have crackers?" And just like that, childhood moved on. Children can step over a grown-up mess quicker than grown-ups can. I gave him crackers. I got the 2-year-old settled. And then I took that tablet into the kitchen and played the rest of the recording just low enough to hear it. There was more, not a lot, but enough. Enough to show that my no had not been misunderstood. It had been resented. Enough to show that the guilt comments had not been accidental. They had been part of a plan. Enough to show that their daddy had been counting on my love, my faith, my reputation, and my desire to keep peace to wear me down. And he had said it himself. "She always does." When I heard that, something inside me settled. Not exploded. Settled. Because sometimes truth does not make you louder. Sometimes truth makes you clear. And I got clear. I did not call him screaming. I did not send the video to every relative with a phone. I did not post a vague quote online with a sunset background. You know the kind. When people show you who they are, believe them. No. I sat down at my kitchen table. I put both hands around a cup of coffee that had once again given up on being warm, and I prayed. I said, "Lord, you saw it. Now show me what to do with it." Because having proof does not mean you get permission to act ugly. Let me say that again. Having proof does not mean you get permission to act ugly. It means you have responsibility now. And I wanted to handle it like God's daughter, not like a woman with fresh ammunition. So I waited. At 2 o'clock, just like he had said, the boy's daddy pulled back into the driveway. I noticed that. Funny how a man can be on time when somebody makes him give a time. He came in, smiling that polished smile. "Everything go okay?" I said. The boys were fine. He looked relieved, like maybe the day had reset things. The boys ran to him. The 4-year-old grabbed his tablet. I said, "Leave that here a minute, baby. MeMe needs to talk to your daddy." My son-in-law looked at me. That smile started fading around the edges. I kept my voice calm. "Can you step onto the porch?" He did. I followed him out and closed the door enough that the boys could not hear. The afternoon sun was bright. The porch boards creaked under my feet. I remember that because sometimes you remember small things when big things are about to happen. He said, "What's up?" I looked at him, and I thought about every yes I had given, every diaper changed, every sandwich made, every time I had rearranged my day, every time I had swallowed a comment so peace could stay in the room. Then I said, "Your son accidentally recorded part of your phone call this morning." His face changed. All the corporate polish in the world could not hold that expression together. He blinked. "What?" I said. The tablet was recording by the window. He did not speak. So I continued. "I heard what you said." His jaw tightened. "I don't know what you think you heard." Now that right there is a sentence people use when they are hoping you heard wrong. I said, "I heard enough." He looked toward the door. I said, "No, the children are inside. We are not putting them in this." That made him look back at me. I kept my voice steady. "You said I would come around once the baby gets here." He swallowed. "You said I like being needed." No answer. "You said I do not have anything else to do." His face flushed. "And you said I would not want to look selfish." Now his eyes dropped. There it was. Not repentance yet, but exposure. And exposure is uncomfortable when pride has been wearing a suit. I said, "Let me make this plain. I love my daughter. I love these boys. I love that baby already. But I am not your child care plan. I am not your pressure release valve. I am not your free employee. And I am not going to be manipulated with my faith, my age, or my love for family." He started to say something. I raised one hand. Not dramatic, just enough. "I am not finished." He closed his mouth, and I believe heaven smiled a little. I said, "From now on, if you need my help, you will ask with a clear time, a clear plan, and respect for my answer. If I say yes, I mean yes. If I say no, I mean no." Then I said it again, slower this time. No is a complete sentence. He stood there looking like a man whose promotion speech had not prepared him for MeMe on the porch. For a moment, neither one of us spoke. Then he said, quieter, "I didn't mean it like that." I said, "Yes, you did, and that is why we are having this conversation." He looked away. I could tell he was embarrassed, maybe angry too. But embarrassment can be the beginning of wisdom if pride will let it. I softened my voice, but I did not soften the truth. "You do not have to use me to be a good husband. You do not have to wear my daughter out trying to look successful. And you do not have to build your family image on somebody else's exhaustion." That one landed. I saw it. He did not know what to do with that sentence, so I gave him something to do. Go get your boys, love your wife, make a real plan before the baby comes. He nodded once, just once. Then he went inside. The boys hugged me goodbye. The 4-year-old whispered, "MeMe, did Daddy get in trouble?" I kissed the top of his head and said, "No, baby. Daddy got a reminder." He said, "Like when I forget to flush." I said, "Something like that?" And there it was. The Lord gave me a laugh right there in the middle of the mess. 'Cause sometimes if you do not laugh, you will cry all the way through supper. They left. I stood on that porch and watched them drive away, and I felt something I had not felt in weeks. Quiet. Real quiet. Not the kind where everybody is pretending. The kind where your soul is not being dragged around by someone else's expectations. God had not exposed the truth so I could destroy anybody. He exposed it so the lie could stop working. That is what light does. It does not have to scream. It just shines, and suddenly everybody can see what was hiding in the dark. I went back inside. The house was messy. There were crackers on the floor. A toy truck was under the chair. One little sock had been left behind like evidence. I picked it up and laughed. Then I said, "Lord, you really did hit record." And in my spirit, I felt that gentle reminder. I saw it before you did. Yes, he did. He saw the whole thing. He saw the kindness. He saw the pressure. He saw the private words. He saw the public smiles. He saw the boundary. And he saw one tired MeMe trying to obey him without losing her witness. That day, God did not just defend me. He taught me. He taught me that I do not have to catch every lie. I do not have to answer every accusation. Because the God who sees all knows how to bring truth to the porch at exactly the right time. And sometimes, all he needs is a child's tablet, an open window, and a man who thought nobody was listening. After the baby was born, the whole family came over for a visit when he was about a month old. I cooked supper. We watched a family movie together on the TV. The boys were running around. The baby was being passed from arm to arm, and for a little while, everything felt sweet and normal. Then my daughter looked over and asked if I could watch all 3 children that Thursday night, and I did not even say no. I just got quiet. I let the silence sit there in a rocking chair for a second. And apparently that silence preached a whole sermon, because before I could say one word, she started thinking out loud and said maybe my sister-in-law could be backup for the 2 older boys. I thought, well, look at God. MeMe's boundary has finally grown legs. If this faith story with MeMe made you laugh, hit that like button. And to all my fellow retired friends, subscribe and share for more life humor, country wisdom, and faith-filled reminders that no is a complete sentence.